Hi, Tirzah, and we're going to be reading chapter 14, the Mountain of God. So in chapter 13, Moses' family has come, and we discover that Moses' family is darker skinned than the rest of the Hebrews are. And some people are not particularly happy about that. They feel like Moses, who is their leader, should be married to one of them. The Mountain of God, chapter 14. So after all these years, you, my husband, are the one chosen to be a judge over our people. Leah glowed with pride as she straightened a fold in Jeraheel's headpiece. I always knew you were wise. Jeraheel smiled and caught his wife about her growing waistline. My little love, it's only as head of 50 that I am appointed. But it is a grave responsibility. I'm touched by the trust given me. On the other hand, I've had a bit of experience ruling over this household. Looking round first at Tirzah, then Ram and Oren, he drew his eyebrows into a mock frown. Yes, father, Oren spoke up quickly, and a good thing we have given you enough trouble to make you sharp. Oren ducked as his father reached a playful hand to tug on his ear. I must meet with the other judges this morning, good wife. Everything Moses has told us to do must be done exactly. We are to wash our clothes today and be ready for tomorrow, when Yahweh will speak from Mount Sinai. Tirzah, my dove, help your mother. He touched the tip of Tirzah's nose gently before he strode away. Well then, you heard your father. There is work to do, her mother said, heading for the washing sticks. Tirzah took down the basket and her spare clothes. She would wear these while the others were being washed. Ram had walked away silently, and Oren was about to follow when Tirzah grabbed the neck of his tunic. Oh, no, you don't, she said. You can help with the beating, and besides, how can we wash your clothes with you still in them? Well, I wasn't going for long, Oren grumbled, his face flushed with anger and guilt at the half-truths. He bit his lip with frustration, trying to think of an excuse to be gone, but nothing came. In his mind was a picture of Mary, Passer's niece, hands protecting her face from the pebbles thrown by Shelob, the potter's son, and two other boys as she passed. Yesterday, Oren had seen her drawing water at an hour when none of the other girls were near to protect her. He had no idea what he could do, but now it would have to wait. Leah looked at her young son, frowned, and handed him a washing stick. Change your clothes, then off with your sister, and mind you, stay until all the washing is finished. Oren felt a sinking in his stomach. There would be no escape for hours yet. I'm going to pause here because how they are washing their clothes is like in a stream, and they beat them with sticks to get the dirt out. We have other things in our washing machine that does that instead of beating it with sticks. When I was a little girl, we had what was called an agitator. And the agitator was like paddles on the inside that would keep the clothes moving. Today, I'm not really sure how it's done. I think it is done by just jets of water, high pressure water. But that's what I mean by the washing sticks. And sometimes a washing stick was used, at least in early America, you would have a pot of boiling water and you put the clothes in, and the washing sticks, I used to have one in my laundry room at my house, was a long stick, and you would use that to stir the clothes around, and then you could pull them up to see if they were clean or put it down and stir. But again, it was acting like an agitator or a paddle. Okay. So, going on. In a deserted spot, about a quarter mile outside the camp, Mary sat sheltered by large overhanging rocks. She would hide until noon and then return to Hannah to fetch the washing. By that time, the others, their washing done, would leave. They would be glad to go back to the cool protection of the tents from the midday's heat. She looked at her hands, darkened by the sun, strong hands. On the back of one palm was a purple bruise where one of the large pebbles had struck her. Gently she rubbed the spot. The welt would heal, its color fade, but nothing could heal the fact that she was an Egyptian by birth, one of the hated people. Some of the Israelites were kind, and if they saw only the Mary who wanted to follow Yahweh now, others avoided her, turned their eyes away, even spoke to Hannah as if she, Mary, were not occupying the same tent. As for the young children like Chelab, they made their feelings well known by taunts and pebbles or anything else handy. "It isn't fair," she whispered, resting her head upon her drawn-up knees. "It isn't fair." At the sound of a familiar greeting, Mary raised her head. It was the Amorite who had escaped from the copper mines and joined the Hebrews as they fled Egypt. She answered gladly, the formal words of her homeland sweet to her tongue. In a few long strides, the man approached, threw his bundle of wood to the ground, and bowed his head politely. "May I join you for a rest, Nisa Passer the scribe?" Mary's eyes widened in surprise. "But how did you know who I was?" She had seen the man before and knew from Hannah who he was, though she'd never spoken to him. "I am Manetto, youngest son of the tomb builder Thutmose. Though my mother was an Amorite, I could have stayed in Egypt and done quite well for a quarrel that left me disowned and an exile in the Pharaoh's copper mines." His tone was bitter. For a moment he paused, then on speaking, his voice lighter. I know from listening to the talk. You serve an old midwife and are the niece of Passer, the scribe, a former customer of Peleg, the Hebrew." Mary's eyes flushed. She should have stayed in Egypt. Here she was, a hated Egyptian, talked about so that even this stranger had heard about her. A black ant crawled to the edge of her robe, and quickly she flattened it with her palm. Manetto's large hand was even quicker. He picked up her small hand and held the bruised side to the sun. "So does the old woman beat you too?" His black eyes, deep set between the eyebrows, searched her face piercingly. Mary was uncomfortable and snatched her hand away. No, Hannah does not beat me," she said. Her tongue stammered on the truth. "It is only the young boys with their pebbles. They do not just talk like their mothers and fathers." She was sorry as soon as she said it, not wanting to confide in this man. Something sinister in his eyes frightened her. Manetto leaned closer, his voice a steely whisper. "Soon you will not have to worry about Hebrew slave children or their foolish parents." Mary looked at him, not understanding. "Those of our number who left Egypt for a better life, not for some strange god, will soon leave behind this rabble of ex-slaves. Once we are safely to the north, our preparations finished, we will be on our way." Manetto placed a long finger under Mary's chin. "You will say nothing of this to anyone. When the time is right, you shall come with us, eh?" Mary's heart beat wildly. She could find no words to say. Her mind raced with conflicting thoughts. There was Hannah, that young man, and Yahweh. Would it be better to leave with her own kind, even if it meant not knowing what lay ahead? Manetto was rising to leave. Remember, not a word must pass those pretty lips. It would be a shame to cut out such a lovely tongue. He smiled, but the smile did nothing to soften his face. With a wave of his hand, he was gone. Mary stood up, looked about her frantically. The sheltering rock no longer seemed safe. She was no longer safe. A tiny cry inside her rose inside her and leaped from her lips. "Yahweh, oh Yahweh, help me." Like a frightened deer, she ran back toward the camp, back to old Hannah. In the morning, Mary took place beside Hannah's bent form on the plain before the mountain of Yahweh, as Moses had commanded. She trembled and clung to Hannah's arm. Hannah seemed in as much fear as Mary. Her quivering voice moaned and whispered prayer as they passed against each other, also groaning in awe. It was as if they stood, all of them, like small ants terrified by the storm, hovering above them. Dense billows of smoke covered the mountaintop, yet it seemed to burn with flames beneath the cloud. Jagged streaks of lightning lit up the sky from one end to the other. Thunderclaps crashed with terrifying loudness. At the base of the mountain, a line of stones marked the boundary beyond which no man, woman, child, or beast could pass and live. Mary shuddered. Who would dare to move 1 foot closer on this terrible, awful day? Tirzah stood close to her mother and the rest of the women who clung together, their little ones clutched tightly by the hand or held in their arms. Beneath her feet, Tirzah felt the ground trembling. Ram's mouth hung open in utter amazement as he stood with his family. His father bowed his head and pressed Oren close to his chest. As Ram stared, the tones of a trumpet coming from somewhere near the mountain grew louder and louder. Men around him were praying, some were weeping, but Ram barely heard them as he listened to a sound like nothing he'd ever heard before. All that Ram knew was that suddenly he was face down on the ground like the rest of the people around him. Only he no longer heard any other voice. He was alone in the world. Yahweh had come and spoken. Later, Ram could never explain how he knew, nor did he try. What happened was simply that Yahweh was there and he knew it. Moses alone had been called into the mountain. When he returned, he warned the people once again not to step beyond the stones marking the edge of the mountain, but to wait for the words of God. Ram would have waited for a lifetime if need be. He knew that he would never be the same after this. The next morning, Moses read the book of the covenant, containing the words of the Lord to the people. This is Yahweh's promise. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all the nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. With one voice, the people responded, whatever the Lord has said, we shall do. Tears rolled down Mary's cheeks as she found herself repeating the promise to Yahweh. She would never desert him, no matter what the cost. Gently, she squeezed Hannah's old hand, and Hannah's smile lit her face with love. Ram was among those young men chosen to bring the bulls to the altar for sacrifice. His strong arms held the halter around the bull's neck firmly, leading the animals skillfully to the priest who waited, knife in hand. The blood of the animals was caught in large bowls, their carcasses burnt. Some of the blood Moses took to pour upon the altar. The rest he sprinkled on the people as a sign of the covenant Yahweh made with them. Overhead, the sky was clear now, the air still, as if no storm had ever broken its black blueness. Only the top of the mountain remained hidden in thick clouds. Tirzah sighed deeply as Aaron dismissed the crowds. Moses and his servant Joshua had gone up into the mountain once more, and the meeting was over. What is it like to see Yahweh? What is it like to see Yahweh, she wondered. Always and always she would remember that for one moment she too heard his voice. There were no words to describe this, but she knew. Tirzah reached a hand to help her mother along the path. Her mother's face shone with happiness in spite of the deep, dark circles beneath her eyes. It would not be long before the new baby came. On the outskirts of the camp, Mary saw Manetto sitting by a campfire with a half-dozen other strangers, none of them Hebrews. Had Manetto gone to the plain yesterday and today? She felt almost sure he had not gone with the others, at least not today. How did his fire come to be so quickly ready, the pot of food already swinging above it, when others were still returning home? She did not look long in his direction as she followed Hannah. Had he seen her? Were those piercing black eyes even now upon her? The thought worried her. I think she has every reason to be fearful of him, since he has threatened to cut her tongue out if she says anything about about the strangers all leaving. Anyway, the next chapter is called A Golden Idol. And some of you may know what this chapter is about, but we'll see if there are any added details. Bye-bye.